welcome to another episode of Ask the Doulas. My name is Alyssa. I am co-owner of Gold Coast and postpartum doula. Today we have Tiffany Townsend. She is one of our birth doulas. Hi, Tiffany.
Good morning.
I was just reading a blog that you sent us, and you have a really beautiful story. You have 5 kids, and tell me about the births of the first 4 versus your last one.
Yeah, so I have 5 children. My first child, I was 16, and I was very impressionable. Even at that point, I really wanted natural birth. My grandmother was an OB, and I remember laboring at home for a long time until I was like 6 centimeters dilated, and she said it was time to go in. And when I went in, I was just really shamed. Why would you stay this long? And
the nurses and doctors?
The nurses, yeah. Nurses? So I never really knew about a home birth at that age. I just knew I wanted to not be around the beeping and bothering of what I expected it to be at the hospital. So yeah, I was really shamed. And when it started to get more intense, I remember just being told that I'm getting the epidural and that this is what's happening. I wasn't really in charge. And I feel like that had a lot to do with me being a minor and being young. So it kind of set the standard for how my births would play out later. I always had that desire. With my next child, I still had the desire, okay, I made it to 6 centimeters. I wasn't dying at home. So obviously, it's something that's possible. But then I found myself in the same kind of thing.
How old were you with your second?
With my second, I was 20 years old.
Okay.
So
do you think when you got to the hospital you were treated any differently? Because of your age?
No, which was surprising because I always equated the way that I was treated because I was
16.
Yeah, because I was a minor and they're telling me what to do. Right. But I just realized that that's the model of care for the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to check your service. We're going to do this. We're going to connect you instead of saying, is it okay for me to? So I wasn't really even comfortable at 20 years old, being vocal about saying no, I don't want that, or I kind of felt like I had to cave into the professionals. They're professionals. They know what I need. They know what should be. They know how I should be pushing, even if it's not comfortable for me. They know what needs to happen. So by baby number 3, I was okay, I'm going to speak up. My second son, I got postpartum so bad. I got postpartum depression so bad, and my family had no idea what to do with me.
This was after baby number 2?
Baby number 2.
Okay.
So baby number 3, I was paranoid. Oh my God, I don't want to ever have postpartum again.
Right.
Can I sacrifice the cap? Whatever I have to do, I'll do it. So I was a little bit more vocal and still not really heard. So I was this is my last baby. I'm not having any more kids. And then here comes Princess Ava. And so I talked to my husband. I'm we're having a home birth. And he was absolutely not. Who's going to clean up the mess? And I was well, maybe it is going to be really messy. Okay, no, we already have 3 kids. We don't need any extra laundry. So hospital birth again. And I remember at the end just being very transparent with my provider and saying, I really struggle with postpartum. I want to do placenta encapsulation. And, I really want to do everything that I can to try to avoid postpartum depression. It was scary. I don't want to feel like that again. And I remember him saying, that is disgusting. Who would ever do that? And I was so embarrassed. I was oh my God.
You're oh, me. I would, but
I would do anything. I would do anything not to go through that. So I just remember feeling really embarrassed and voiceless. And I felt like I should be able to be transparent with how I was feeling, and instead of it being a safe place, or even if he thought it was disgusting for him to say, let me look into that. Let me see if I can find some evidence-based research or something, not make me feel like a cannibal. So with her, same thing. I really waited this time. by the time I got there, I was 8 centimeters dilated. I was trying to hold on at home, and my husband's I really think that it's time. I'm no, let me cook dinner. Let me do laundry. He was I really feel like you're in labor. He didn't know how far I was. So when I got there, they're rush her upstairs. We got to get her in the gown and get IV started and all of these things. So all my births have been pretty traumatic. So I was trying to hold off as long as possible. And the same thing, I ended up getting an epidural like 9 centimeters dilated, which didn't work.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't work because I was already pushing by the time they were done.
But they gave you one anyway. Why? They can bill you for it?
They can bill. Had insurance, that good old insurance. So I just, I remember the nurse telling me, like, there's no reward for this. Like, you don't get anything from having a baby natural. And I'm like, but I feel like you do. And now that I know better, I know that there is a reward. So baby number 5, I was like, listen, I'm the boss. Like, I'm the head honcho. I'm going to say what's happening. Like, I will not be at a hospital this time. Like, I need my voice to be heard. I need to feel like I'm accountable. And if I'm spending thousands of dollars, I want people to hear me. Having a baby at a hospital is not cheap and it's not free. And I felt like I had to remind myself that, like, these people are essentially my employees. And if I was running a business, I wouldn't have anybody tell me how I want things done that I'm paying for. Mm-hmm. So I hired a midwife. The care was totally different than anything I had ever experienced.
Prenatally, you mean? Like during pregnancy?
Prenatally. Like, the way she treated me the whole time that I was pregnant and breastfeeding for the first 4 babies, because that was kind of my thing. Like, pregnant, breastfeed, wean, pregnant, breastfeed, wean. I never was approached about breastfeeding. Like, people just assumed that I probably just wouldn't. And I actually breastfed all of my children, even at, being a high school student, college student, working to, all of those transitions in my life, I actually breastfed. And not because I had any support, but because I just was like a bookworm, and I knew that my kids were at more risk of infant mortality and all those kind of things that I just didn't want to deal with.
So even as a 16-year-old, you were able to exclusively breastfeed?
Exclusively breastfeed.
Wow.
Yep.
That's
was
amazing.
Hard.
Yeah.
That was hard. I was like pumping in like bathroom stalls.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of judgment. Like, a lot of people assume that a 16-year-old girl that gets pregnant has to be some sort of a way, and that wasn't it for me at all. But I was just like, I'll just take the label and I'll just try to make the best of.
But good for you for knowing even enough about that. I feel like at 16, I had no idea about breastfeeding and the benefits of breastfeeding for you and baby.
Yeah, I didn't know so much for me, but I was just like, I don't want my baby to be dumb, so like, let me breastfeed. Like, even though the reasons behind it were probably not as scientific as what they are now for me, because I'm a little bit more educated, like, something in me felt like, okay, like, if my boobs are leaking milk, then I should use it. And yeah, it was hard. Like, breastfeeding is hard sometimes, especially in the beginning when you don't know anything. You don't know about a proper latch. You don't know about thresher, all these other things. Right. But we made it, and my son is a genius. But then with baby number 5, I hired a midwife, and, she listened to me. She took time to understand, like, my values, my dynamics, like, why I felt the way that I felt about birth and what I wanted, what were my ideas. And then the day that I went into labor, like, it was my least traumatic birth, like the easiest birth. And I was able to move and do the things that I felt like my body were telling me to do without people dictating to me
what I needed.
You mean not
letting you eat and drink and strapping you to a bed?
I ate and I drank and I didn't poop on myself. Like, I did all of that stuff. Like, I guess that's everybody's biggest fear.
Right.
Like, oh, we can't do it because you're going to poop on yourself or something. Like, I don't know. We know that, like, they don't want us to eat because if there's an emergency.
In case there's a seat, yeah.
Right, but it was fine. It was totally fine. I had my daughter, like, I danced, and I remember initially, like, when I first went into labor, we were in the middle of transitioning to another house, so my husband was, like, working all night at the other house, and I was, like, at home, just, kids were sleeping, like, in the bathtub, just, like, finding my mantra and focusing in on my capability, like, I'm able and I can do this for my baby, and just talking to my belly and saying, like, we're in this together. Mm-hmm. Like, I've never done this before. Like, you've never come into the world before. So, like, we both have a fresh start to let this be our normal. And it was beautiful and it was empowering. And those hormone surges after my baby came, like, you don't always experience that if you don't, like, have that pinnacle of birth, like, when you're there and it's just, like, really intense and you feel like, okay, I don't think I can do it, and then it's done. Like, those surge of hormones are, like, indescribable. I never felt so strong. I definitely like had my chest poked out. Like I still have my chest poked out.
I did this.
I did.
Yeah.
It's like I had a baby at home, and you know, everybody thought it was really irresponsible and that I was putting my baby at danger. But I know better because I did my homework and I researched and I understood like midwives can't just be midwives. Like they have to have a certain level of education and training, and they can resuscitate and all these things. Like they can act in an emergency, and we don't live far from the hospital. So
right.
Had anything happen, like a transfer would have been fine. But I wish that I would have done that with baby number one. And for moms who don't feel comfortable with home birth, I just hope to empower them to speak up. Like don't be embarrassed to say like, no, this is what I want. And like, I need you to be respectful of that. Like, don't shame me for my ideas if they're not yours, because we have to have peace as women with the choices that we make with our kids. And when it feels like a dictatorship, you really feel like you're relinquishing power to somebody who doesn't even have to raise your baby, breastfeed your baby, wake up in the middle of the night, like they just catch your baby, give them to you, and go on to the next baby. So we have to have peace about our choices.
Yeah, and I think giving women choices is the biggest thing, knowing that they have choices. But then I'm seeing the flip side of that too, to where what if someone goes into this saying, I want this beautiful natural home birth, and then something goes awry and they end up at the hospital. Now you have a mother who feels like a failure, and that's bad too. So it's this hard line to walk of, you have choices and you can have ideas and you can have a plan, but it always has to be flexible.
Absolutely.
What do you think would have happened if you had this beautiful home birth planned and then something went wrong and you had to be rushed to the hospital? Then
I would know, like, in the back of my mind, I always had that in my mind. And even being a doula, like, I've experienced that where moms have planned a home birth and for whatever reason we end up at the hospital. However your baby comes, as long as you feel like you're empowered and you're listened to, like that's what's important. Healthy babies are the most important. But still in the moment, being transferred, like you still have a voice. Like there's still some things that you can say, no, I'm not interested in that, or absolutely. So it ultimately all comes down to like still using your voice. I don't feel like a mom that chooses to home birth is any better of a mother than a mom who has a baby at a hospital. But her voice is sometimes heard more because of the care that she's receiving.
Right. So how would you, how do you help those moms who are in that transition period and thinking, I failed, I've already failed, I haven't even had this baby yet, and I've already failed?
Processing their emotions. Like, what's important is that baby's here healthy. If we have to do a transfer for whatever reason, sometimes it's as simple as like D cells, and we need to monitor baby a little bit closely. So that's not a failure. You can still do your natural birth. If something happens where we have to have an emergency cesarean, like your baby is here, let's focus on breastfeeding or whatever the next goal is. Because as long as you're a mom, like things are not going to go the way that we want them to go all the time. I know
for the rest of your life. That's like, now that you have a baby, nothing is in your control anymore, really.
Plan and then have a plan A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. Like, so yeah, no, I don't feel like anybody should feel bad about that. There's nothing wrong with setting goals, but also being flexible is super important.
Right. Yeah, I think. And the support of a doula throughout that transition. I mean, I guess thinking about a mom having to do that without a support person is so much harder. And the role of a doula during that transition can really be critical.
Absolutely.
And like you said, even just processing what happened.
You have somebody to walk through what happened, like to walk you through your feelings and why or how or all of those things that happened to my sister. I was my sister's doula, and she started with the home birth and she ended with an emergency cesarean, which probably wasn't all the way necessary. But at that point, you go to the hospital and when you're a doula, and you can't mix the roles. But it was really difficult watching her process afterwards. She really struggled. She did feel like she failed. And, she's a great mother, and we had so many milestones after that. Like, she breastfed like a champ, and she just did it. But even today, she still has that feeling like, I wish that I could have done that. I wish that things would have been differently. and just having somebody there to process those feelings and to remind them, like, but look at all the things that you're doing. Like, look at how great you're bonding with your baby. Look at how much you take care of her. Like, look how happy she is. Those things count for something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love, too, that we've changed from this cesarean section term to cesarean birth. Mm-hmm. Because it is. You still gave birth to a baby. It was just a different way. Right. Whether vaginally or cesarean, it's still a cesarean birth. Absolutely. And I feel like even just saying that can make a mother feel a little bit better mm-hmm. about if her plan goes awry. Mm-hmm. You still end up with a beautiful baby with a cesarean birth. Right. And then with a doula there's still, and you just recently had a birth where, most hospitals don't let you go back into the OR, unfortunately. Hopefully that will change.
Hopefully
But
soon.
A doula support, like you said, that whole throughout pregnancy, during that time leading up to the birth and heading to the hospital, they might have the cesarean birth, and then you're there for immediate support mm-hmm. following that. And that's so critical too. You can help with that bonding. Yeah. And I think it's getting a little bit easier. The statistics will tell you that, if you have a cesarean birth, you're not going to be able to breastfeed and you won't be able to bond. And there's all these like horrible, horrible things. And hospitals are catching on. And maybe you can tell me a little bit more, like letting them hold the baby right away, or even still try to breastfeed right away. Like mm-hmm. all these things hospitals are getting it, right? This baby friendly
I feel like they're trying because they don't have a choice, because we're not taking the crap anymore.
Right.
Because we're like, if you can't give me skin to skin after my cesarean birth, then I need to find a doctor who will. Mm-hmm. If there's no emergent reason why a baby can't have skin to skin, there's no reason why we should be turning that down. We know that that's so important for bonding, for breastfeeding. And what I've seen is that the moms that are able to do that skin to skin immediately do have a better outcome of breastfeeding. They do better. The baby is more bonded. Like, babies know their moms. I don't know how many times like babies come out screaming and crying, and as soon as you lay them on their mom's chest, like it's mm-hmm. like instant silence.
Yeah,
like they know.
Just comforted.
This makes you like get emotional. Just
I'm getting the chills. Yeah. You see my chills? I know, it's wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That is an awesome story. Listen in next time. We're going to be doing a couple other episodes with Tiffany, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. Email us at info@goldcoastdoulas.com. Find us on Facebook or Instagram, and check out our website, goldcoastdoulas.com. Remember, these moments are golden.